What if the quietest, most overlooked girl at school, the one everyone thought was a joke, picked up her violin and unleashed a storm so powerful it left an entire gym breathless? You won't believe what happened next. There's a silence that feels heavy, thick, like fog, almost suffocating. It clings to the walls of Lincoln Middle School, a place where whispers are currency, and every glance can cut deeper than any word. In the midst of it all, there's one girl who's mastered the art of blending into that silence, of making herself so small that she practically disappears. Her name is Layla Johnson. Layla isn't the kind of girl who commands attention. In fact, she's the opposite. Petite, quiet, with skin the color of rich coffee and eyes that always seem to be looking somewhere else, somewhere far away. You could walk past her every day and never truly see her. That's how she likes it. She's the girl in the back row by the window, clutching a worn-out violin case like it's her lifeline, her head bowed, as if in prayer. To most, she's invisible, a shadow that drifts through the hallways without a sound. But what they don't know, what no one at Lincoln Middle School would even imagine, is that inside that quiet exterior, there's a storm brewing. A storm that has been gathering strength for years, waiting for the right moment to break free. They don't know that when Layla holds her violin, she becomes someone else entirely, someone fierce, passionate, and unbreakable, someone they would never expect. That day in fifth period, it happened. Coach Evans, loud and brash, stood in front of the class, clipboard in hand. His voice boomed like thunder, announcing the upcoming talent show with a hint of disinterest, as if he knew it was going to be a waste of time. He didn't care who signed up. It was just another school event to get through. The kids barely listened, more interested in their phones and side conversations. Until Miss Parker, the music teacher with her thin, sharp voice, leaned over and whispered something to Coach Evans. Her eyes glinted with a hint of mischief as she nodded toward the back of the room. What about Layla Johnson? She's always carrying that violin. Let's see if she can actually play. A smirk spread across Coach Evans' face. Yeah, he called out, voice thick with mockery. Layla, why don't you sign up? You've been dragging that thing around all year. Might as well show us it's not just for show. The class erupted into laughter. It wasn't cruel, not at first, just curious, amused. But then someone mimicked the sound of a screechy violin, and the laughter grew louder, more pointed. Layla felt her face heat up, the noise digging into her skin like tiny needles. She wanted to sink into the floor, to disappear completely. But instead, she just sat there, gripping the neck of her violin case, knuckles white. And then, something inside her snapped. Maybe it was the memory of her grandfather's rough, calloused hands guiding hers on the bow, or the way he'd always said, "Play your truth, Layla. Let them hear your soul." Whatever it was, it rose up inside her like a flame, and before she knew it, she was speaking, her voice quiet but steady. "I'll do it," she said. The room fell silent, like the eye of a storm. Coach Evans raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" Layla didn't bother answering. She just nodded, taking the clipboard from his hands and writing her name on the sign-up sheet. When she handed it back, Coach Evans looked almost disappointed, like he'd been hoping for a reaction, fear, embarrassment, anything. But Layla had already made up her mind. This wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving something to herself. For the rest of the day, the whispers followed her. "Did you hear? Layla's actually going to play. She's gonna crash and burn. Maybe she'll just freeze on stage." Layla didn't respond. She kept her head down, holding her violin case tighter than ever. When the final bell rang, she made her way home, steps heavier than usual. The south side of Chicago greeted her with familiar sounds, cars rumbling by, kids shouting from the basketball court. As she climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment, she felt the weight of the upcoming performance settle on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Marie was home, scrubbing the kitchen counter, exhaustion etched into her face. She looked up when Layla entered, immediately noticing the tension in her daughter's frame. Something happened at school? Layla hesitated, then nodded. I signed up for the talent show. Marie's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and concern. You did? Why? Layla didn't have a simple answer. Because they don't think I can do it. I have to show them. Marie softened, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Baby, you don't owe them anything. It's not for them, Layla whispered. It's for me. Marie reached out and squeezed her shoulder. Then play like it. Let them hear who you are. That night, Layla opened her violin case, the familiar scent of wood and resin calming her nerves. She drew the bow across the strings, the first note hesitant but true. The melody that followed wasn't perfect. It wavered, slipped, caught itself. But it was honest, it was raw. And as Layla played, she knew that when the time came, she wouldn't hold back. She didn't know what would happen at the talent show, but one thing was certain. When she stepped on that stage, they were going to hear her. All of her. And for the first time, Layla wasn't afraid of being seen. The weekend stretched ahead of Layla like a vast, uncertain landscape. As the reality of what she had done sank in, so did the doubt. She replayed that moment in her head. The way she had stood up and agreed to perform at the talent show. The way Coach Evans had raised an eyebrow. The laughter simmering just beneath the surface of the room. It was as if she had signed a contract with herself, one that couldn't be undone. Now she was committed, and the thought of facing everyone next week with her violin on stage made her stomach twist into knots. Saturday morning was unusually quiet. Marie had already left for her early shift at the hospital, and Caleb was still asleep. Layla sat at the small, chipped dining table, her violin case open in front of her. She touched the strings gently, the familiar feel of the wood calming her racing thoughts. She knew she had to practice, not just to prove herself to the others, but because something deep inside her demanded it. She tightened the bow and adjusted the strings, carefully listening for the pitch, her grandfather's voice echoing in her mind. If it sounds like it's stretching too far, pull back. Let the sound find its place. Layla closed her eyes and started with the scales, letting her fingers find their rhythm, letting the tension in her shoulders slowly melt away. The melody started to emerge, hesitant at first, then bolder. She was working on a piece that had no name yet, just fragments of emotion stitched together by notes. It wasn't purely classical, and it wasn't entirely jazz. It was somewhere in between, filled with slides and trills that spoke of yearning and hope. Layla lost herself in it, playing until the sound of footsteps pulled her back to reality. Caleb stood in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Mornin'," he mumbled, climbing onto the chair across from her. "You're loud today." Layla offered a small smile. "Sorry," Caleb shook his head. "No, it's nice. Sounds kinda sad, though." Layla shrugged. "Sometimes things that are sad can be beautiful, too." Caleb didn't really understand, but he nodded like he did. "You're gonna play that at school?" "Maybe," Layla replied, unsure if it was the right choice. The thought of performing something so personal in front of everyone felt both terrifying and essential. It was like letting them read a page from her diary, one that was written in the language of strings and bows. When Marie came home that afternoon, she found Layla still practicing, sweat gathering at her temples. "You been at it all day?" she asked, concern lining her voice. Layla nodded. "I can't get it right. It's supposed to build here, but it keeps falling flat." Marie set down her bag and listened for a moment as Layla tried the passage again, the bow catching slightly on the upstroke. "Maybe you're pushing it too hard. Sometimes you gotta let it breathe." Layla lowered the violin and sighed. "What if I mess up in front of everyone?" Marie pulled out a chair and sat down next to her. "Honey, being scared doesn't mean you're not ready. It just means it matters to you. You think all those people clapping at fancy concerts never felt like running off the stage? They're just better at hiding it. You don't have to be perfect, Just be you. Later that evening, Layla tried to relax, but the tension wouldn't leave. She pulled out the notebook her grandfather had given her years ago, filled with his handwritten songs and little sketches of musical notes. One page had a line written in his neat, careful script. Music is what truth sounds like. The next morning, Aaron texted her, "Need help practicing? I got the piano at the church free this afternoon." Layla hesitated before replying, "Sure." When she arrived at the small, worn church where Aaron's father worked as a custodian, the place was empty except for Aaron, tinkering with the old upright piano. He grinned when he saw her. "Brought your strings of destiny?" Layla couldn't help but laugh, tension easing a bit. "You really think I'm gonna pull this off?" Aaron shrugged. "Honestly, yeah, but you're not gonna do it by overthinking. Let's just play. No pressure." They started slow, Aaron finding chords to match her melody. Layla played the opening notes, softer this time, letting the sound breathe. Aaron added subtle chords, then a riff that made the piece feel lighter, almost hopeful. Layla tried a new variation, bending the note just enough to add a hint of longing. When they finished, the final chord hung in the air, both of them smiling. "See," Aaron said, tapping the keys lightly. "You've got something here. Just don't let fear steal it from you." By the time Layla left the church, something had shifted inside her. Maybe it was the way Aaron had made it feel more like a jam session than a test, or maybe it was realizing that the piece didn't have to be perfect, it just had to be hers. That night, Layla played the piece again in her room, the melody smoother, fuller, like it was finding its own voice. Marie knocked lightly on the door before peeking in. "That sounds better," she said, a hint of pride in her tone. Layla put down the violin. "I think I'm ready." Marie walked over and hugged her. "Just remember, baby, it's not about them. It's about you. You play your truth." When Layla lay down that night, sleep didn't come easily. But it wasn't fear keeping her awake. It was excitement. She was finally beginning to understand what her grandfather meant. Music wasn't about being flawless or impressive. It was about letting people hear who you truly were, even if it scared you. And when she closed her eyes, she didn't think about the laughter or the whispers that waited for her on Monday. Instead, she thought about the feeling she had while playing, like the world had faded away and it was just her, her violin, and the story she needed to tell. The night before the talent show, Layla could hardly sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw herself standing alone on that wide, empty stage with every eye in the gym piercing into her, waiting, expecting, maybe even hoping for her to fail. The pressure wrapped around her chest like a tight band, making it hard to breathe. She sat up in bed, staring at the soft glow of the streetlight through her bedroom window. Somewhere in the next room, Caleb was snoring softly, a sound that usually made her smile. Tonight, it only reminded her that the world wouldn't stop moving just because she was terrified. She reached for her violin, placing it gently on her lap. Her fingers traced the familiar scratches on its surface, the nicks and dents that told stories of practice sessions that lasted too long, of moments where frustration had bubbled over into too tight grips and misplaced bows. She tightened the strings one by one, testing their sound with soft, careful plucks. The room seemed to hold its breath as she began to play. Just a simple melody, the one she always started with when she needed comfort. The notes were smooth, gliding through the quiet, reminding her of why she started playing in the first place. She wasn't performing for them. She was performing for herself, for her grandfather, for the little girl who learned to let the music speak when words felt too heavy. When morning finally came, the sky was overcast, heavy clouds hanging low over the city. Marie made a quick breakfast, but Layla barely touched it. The nerves made her stomach feel hollow, too twisted to hold anything down. As they walked to school, Marie gave Layla's shoulder a reassuring squeeze, whispering, "Just play your truth, baby. They'll hear it." At Lincoln Middle School, the gym had been transformed. Fold-out chairs were arranged in rows, the makeshift stage framed by colorful banners that read, "Lincoln Talent Showcase." The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting uneven shadows on the polished floor. Layla could hear the excited chatter of students and parents as they filed in, settling down with murmured conversations and restless energy. Backstage, Layla tuned her violin again, every movement slow and deliberate. She could hear the muffled sound of the first act, a group of cheerleaders performing a synchronized routine. The applause that followed was polite but lacked enthusiasm. One act after another went by, a boy juggling, two girls singing a pop song slightly off-key. The crowd was restless, their attention wandering, phones lighting up as students recorded snippets or scrolled through social media. Aaron found her in the corner, where she was meticulously tightening the bow. He gave her a quick, encouraging smile. "You ready?" he whispered. Layla didn't trust herself to speak, so she just nodded. He seemed to understand. "They're gonna love it. Just play the way you did at the church. Forget they're even there." When the announcer finally called her name, next up, Layla Johnson, the gym seemed to hold its collective breath. She stepped onto the stage, the spotlight hot against her face. The noise faded into a dull hum, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Layla positioned the violin under her chin, fingers trembling against the strings. She could see Coach Evans leaning against the gym door, his arms crossed, looking indifferent. Miss Parker sat closer to the front, her face unreadable. Layla closed her eyes. She drew the bow across the strings, and the first note floated into the air, soft and trembling like a bird testing its wings. A few people shifted in their seats, unsure of what to expect. But as the melody began to swell, the notes intertwined, smooth, raw, and full of something indescribable. It wasn't just music. It was emotion laid bare. She moved through the piece, the violin singing under her touch. The melody dipped and rose, sometimes mournful, sometimes fierce, telling a story without words. Her bow danced across the strings, creating layers of sound that wrapped around the room. The middle section came where the rhythm shifted to a jazz-inspired run, and Layla didn't hesitate, letting the notes flow in unexpected patterns, a nod to her grandfather's love for improvisation. Her fingers moved faster, the bow slicing through the air, filling the gym with a vibrant, living sound. When she reached the final passage, Layla let the music slow, drawing out the notes like a whispered secret. The last note hung in the air, stretching out into the silence that followed. Layla lowered the violin, breathing hard, eyes still closed. She could feel the sweat beading on her forehead, the room so quiet it almost felt empty. Then, like a wave crashing, the applause erupted. It started with one or two claps, hesitant and slow, but soon the whole gym was on its feet, cheering, whistling, clapping until it felt like the room itself was vibrating. Layla opened her eyes, blinking in the bright light, and saw Aaron standing, grinning ear to ear, leading the ovation. Psst, psst. Parker was clapping too, her usual stern expression softened. Coach Evans gave a grudging nod, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. Layla's chest ached with something like relief, but also pride. She took a small bow, heart pounding, and walked off the stage, every step lighter than the last. Backstage, Aaron caught her in a hug. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." She could hardly believe it herself. For the first time, Layla didn't feel small or invisible. She felt powerful, seen, and more importantly, heard. She had done what she set out to do, made them listen, not just to the music but to her heart. That evening, at home, Marie didn't need to ask how it went. Layla's glowing expression said it all. Caleb hugged her tightly, declaring that his sister was a superstar. Layla couldn't stop smiling. She had faced the fear, embraced the risk, and in that gym, for those few minutes, she had shown them all exactly who she was. That night, as she lay in bed, Layla thought about how everything had changed, not because the others saw her differently, but because she finally saw herself. Brave, strong, unbreakable. And as she drifted to sleep, she knew that this was just the beginning. Monday morning arrived with a chill in the air, a cold wind sweeping through Chicago and rattling the windows of Lincoln Middle School. Layla Johnson stood at the entrance, violin case in hand, heart thumping against her rib cage. Over the weekend, she had relived her performance 100 times in her head. The trembling start, the moment the music took hold of her, and the deafening applause that followed. But now, standing at the school's front steps, doubt clawed at her confidence once more. Had it really happened the way she remembered? Would they still look at her the same way? The hallways buzzed with energy, louder than usual for a Monday. Layla pulled her hood up, trying to shield herself from the curious stares. But there was something different, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Instead of whispering behind her back, some students nodded as she passed, almost like they were acknowledging her existence for the first time. A few even murmured compliments, quick and quiet, as if they were still processing what they had witnessed. Layla reached her locker, trying to ignore the fluttering in her stomach. As she spun the combination, Sasha, one of the cheerleaders who used to giggle whenever Layla walked by, appeared at her side. Sasha's face was different, less guarded, almost sincere. "Hey," she said, twirling a strand of blonde hair nervously. "That was really beautiful on Friday. I didn't know you could play like that." Layla glanced sideways, unsure if Sasha was mocking her, but the girl's expression was soft, without a hint of sarcasm. Layla gave a small nod. "Thanks," she whispered, barely loud enough to hear. A few lockers down, Malik, one of the boys who used to joke about her violin, walked past, giving her a quick nod. "You got some talent, Johnson," he mumbled, almost as if admitting it too openly would cost him something. Layla couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. It wasn't about their approval. It was about the realization that they had seen something beyond their narrow assumptions. In the classroom, Coach Evans glanced up from his clipboard as Layla took her usual seat by the window. He cleared his throat a little awkwardly. "Nice job at the talent show, Layla," he said, loud enough for the whole class to hear. A few students looked back at her, eyes wide. Coach Evans never complimented anyone. Layla managed a small, grateful smile, but kept her head down. As the day went on, Layla noticed the subtle changes everywhere. In the cafeteria, Aaron waved her over to his table instead of their usual corner by the vending machine. A few other students nodded at her as she passed, and when she sat down, Aaron leaned in conspiratorially. "I told you they'd see it," he whispered. Layla looked around, still half expecting someone to snicker or make a rude comment. Instead, Sasha joined them, setting her tray down with a careful smile. "I was talking to some of the girls," she began, pushing her fries around with a fork. "We were thinking, maybe you could play with the pep band at the next basketball game. You know, add something different?" Aaron raised his eyebrows, impressed. Layla hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She had never been invited to join anything before. I I don't know," she stammered. "I've never played in a band." Sasha shrugged. "Neither have we, but it could be cool. You made the violin sound powerful, not just, sad." Layla couldn't help but smile. The violin wasn't just a melancholy instrument. It could be fierce, triumphant, and Sasha had seen that now. "Maybe," Layla replied, her heart warming to the idea. After lunch, as Layla walked down the hall, Ms. Parker caught up with her. The teacher's face was flushed, but not with anger this time. "Layla, can we talk for a moment?" she asked, guiding her into the empty music room. When the door closed, Ms. Parker took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology," she started. "When I suggested you play at the talent show, I didn't think you'd take it seriously. I shouldn't have made assumptions." Layla looked at the woman, surprise flashing across her face. Miss Parker continued, almost reluctantly. You proved me wrong. You didn't just play well, you played with soul. It reminded me why I teach music in the first place. You made me realize I was wrong to underestimate you. Layla didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to snap back, to say that an apology after the fact didn't make it right. But she could see the regret in Ms. Parker's eyes, and something in her softened. It's okay, Layla murmured. I needed to prove it to myself too. Ms. Parker gave a faint smile. You did. And you reminded me to look beyond what I assume. You have a real gift, Layla. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt it. Walking out of the music room, Layla felt lighter. It wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about knowing that her music had changed something, not just in the people around her, but in herself. When the final bell rang, Aaron caught up to her at the bike racks. You good? He asked, noticing the thoughtful look on her face. Layla nodded slowly. Yeah, better than I thought I'd be. As she walked home, violin case bouncing gently against her leg, she thought about how everything had shifted. It wasn't just about the applause or the sudden kindness from classmates. It was about being seen, really seen, for the first time. And that meant more than any words of praise. That evening, she practiced again, but it wasn't out of fear or desperation. It was because playing made her feel whole, made her feel alive. She knew now that her music wasn't just for herself anymore. It was a way to share a piece of her soul with the world. When Marie came home from work, she found Layla at the window, playing softly, the notes floating out into the night air. She didn't interrupt, just stood there listening, a smile tugging at her lips. Layla caught her reflection in the window and saw something new: confidence. For once, she wasn't hiding behind the music. She was letting it speak, clear and strong. As the song ended, Caleb peeked his head around the door. You're happy, he declared, as if he had made a discovery. Layla couldn't help but laugh, pulling him into a hug. Yeah, she said softly. I guess I am. The weeks that followed the talent show were unlike anything Layla Johnson had ever experienced. Lincoln Middle School had become a different place, not just because of how the students treated her, but because of how she felt walking through the hallways. There was no longer that need to make herself small, to hide behind her violin case, or melt into the shadows. Layla had found her voice, not just through the violin, but in how she carried herself, how she looked people in the eye instead of staring at the floor. It wasn't just the students who had changed. Teachers now greeted her differently. Ms. Parker made a point to say good morning when she passed in the halls, and even Coach Evans, notorious for his gruff indifference, gave her a respectful nod when he saw her in gym class. It was as if everyone had collectively decided to see her for the first time, to acknowledge her not just as the quiet girl with the violin, but as Layla, the musician who had captivated an entire gym with one powerful performance. One day after school, as Layla was packing up her violin, Aaron bounded over, his face flushed with excitement. You'll never guess, he said, practically bouncing on his heels. Ms. Parker's putting together a music showcase at the end of the year. She wants you to be the lead soloist. Layla blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. Me? Lead soloist? Aaron nodded, grinning from ear to ear. Yeah, she said your performance inspired her to get more students involved in music, and she wants you to help with the arrangement. Layla's mind raced. The thought of performing again, this time not just for one song but as the centerpiece of an entire showcase, was both thrilling and terrifying. But there was something else too, a surge of pride. She wasn't just being asked to play, she was being asked to lead. That evening, at home, Layla sat at the small dining table, scribbling notes in her grandfather's old music journal. She could almost hear his voice, encouraging her to think beyond what was comfortable, to stretch her creativity. Caleb wandered over, peering at the messy notations. What's that? He asked. Layla smiled. tapping her pencil against the page. A new song, something bigger than anything I've done before. Caleb gave a solemn nod as if he completely understood. Can it be loud? Like the way thunder sounds right before the rain? Layla laughed softly. Yeah, loud and bold. As she practiced that night, the melody took shape, starting soft and tentative before swelling into something bold and triumphant. It was a reflection of her journey, how she had gone from being barely noticed to making herself heard. The piece merged classical precision with jazz improvisation, a tribute to her grandfather's influence. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her story, blending the past with the future. The next day, during music club, Layla shared the concept with Aaron and a few other students who had joined since the talent show. Sasha was there too, tapping her pencil in rhythm as Layla played a few fragments. Aaron added chords on the piano, and soon the room was filled with a collaborative energy that made Layla's heart race. They experimented with harmonies, layering sounds that clashed and then resolved in unexpected ways. Miss Parker peeked her head in, clearly impressed. Sounds like you've got something special brewing, she remarked. Layla glanced at Aaron, who gave her an encouraging nod. We're still figuring it out, Layla replied, trying to sound modest. But inside, she felt that familiar rush of excitement. As the showcase approached, Layla found herself at the center of rehearsals, guiding other students through their parts, encouraging them when they hit a wrong note. It was strange. She had always seen herself as someone who needed to be led, not the one doing the leading. But here she was, making suggestions, offering tips, even calming Sasha down when the harmony didn't quite fit. On the night of the showcase, the gym was transformed once again, decorated with twinkling lights and a banner that read, "Music that moves us." Layla stood backstage, heart thudding, but this time it wasn't the same crippling fear. It was anticipation, a readiness to share what they had created. When it was time for the final piece, Layla took her place at center stage. The first few notes were soft, almost hesitant, like a question waiting to be answered. Aaron joined in on the piano, his chords grounding her melody. As the song grew bolder, the other instruments joined. Sasha's flute, Malik on the drums, even a small choir that layered harmonies in the background. The music swelled, building into something vast and uncontainable. It wasn't just a performance, it was a statement. Layla let herself get lost in it, bow moving effortlessly, fingers dancing on the strings. The final crescendo hit like a wave, and when the last note faded, the applause was immediate and thunderous. Afterward, as people filed out of the gym, Marie rushed forward and pulled Layla into a fierce hug. You were amazing, she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. Caleb bounced on his toes, chanting, You're famous! You're famous! Miss Parker approached, her expression warm. You've changed the way people think about music here, she said, and about you. You should be proud. As they walked home, Aaron talked nonstop about how they should make the music club a permanent thing, how they could write original compositions for every event. Layla just listened, feeling the warmth of belonging for the first time in a long time. When they reached her building, Aaron hesitated. Hey, he said, more serious now. I'm proud of you. Not just for playing, but for showing everyone who you really are. Layla felt a blush rise to her cheeks, but she didn't shy away from it. Thanks for believing in me, she replied. I couldn't have done it without you. That night, as she sat by the window, violin in her lap, Layla didn't play right away. She just looked out at the city, feeling the hum of life outside. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of being seen, of being heard. She knew now that her music was more than just a way to hide. It was a way to declare, boldly and unapologetically, that she had something to say. And now, the world was ready to listen. In the weeks following the showcase, Layla Johnson's world seemed to expand in unexpected ways. The transformation that began with the talent show had grown roots, spreading into every aspect of her life at Lincoln Middle School. Students who once overlooked her now greeted her in the hallways with nods and smiles. Teachers seemed to notice her more, not just as a student, but as an individual. It wasn't fame that she had gained, it was recognition, the sense that people saw her for who she truly was. The music club had become a staple after school, and Layla found herself naturally taking on a leadership role. Sasha, Malik, and Aaron were regular members, but each week, new faces joined, curious to learn and eager to be part of something that felt special. Miss Parker offered her guidance when needed, but mostly allowed Layla to take the lead, teaching others to embrace their instruments, to make mistakes, and find their own sound. One Tuesday afternoon, as Layla was setting up her sheet music, Aaron approached her with a hesitant smile. "Guess what?" he said, almost too casually. "They're holding auditions for the City Youth Orchestra next month. Ms. Parker thinks we should try out. Together." Layla froze, the idea both thrilling and terrifying. "You really think we're ready for that?" Aaron shrugged, but his eyes were bright with excitement. "Why not? After everything we've done, it feels like the next step. Besides, playing in an orchestra would be amazing." The thought lingered with Layla as she practiced that evening at home. She remembered how it felt to perform alone on stage, the vulnerability and the strength it had taken. Playing with others was different, but it didn't scare her the way it once might have. As she played a slow, haunting melody, she could almost hear Aaron's piano accompanying her, filling in the spaces with warm harmonies. The idea grew roots, and by the time she set her violin down, she knew she wanted to try. The next day, Layla found herself in the music room with Miss Parker, discussing the logistics of preparing for the auditions. Miss Parker seemed more animated than usual, laying out sheet music and explaining the selection process. "It's competitive," she warned, "but I believe you two have what it takes. You've shown that you can captivate an audience. Now it's about precision and teamwork." Layla took the sheet music home, spending long evenings practicing the intricate passages. The piece was challenging, a classical composition that required a blend of technical skill and emotional depth. Aaron came over on weekends and they practiced together, sometimes stumbling through the complicated parts but always pushing forward. Layla learned to adjust her tempo to match his, while Aaron softened his dynamics to complement her violin's voice. It wasn't just about playing the notes, it was about listening, adapting, finding harmony between their instruments. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Marie knocked on Layla's door, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Thought you might need a break," she said, smiling. Aaron gratefully took his mug, and Layla leaned back against the wall, exhaustion settling into her bones. "Mom?" Layla started, hesitant. "Do you think I can really do this? Auditioning for something that big?" Marie sat on the edge of the bed, thoughtful. "Baby, you've already done the hardest part. You found your voice. You let people see you. This? This is just the next step. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you." The words settled in Layla's heart, calming the storm of doubt. She glanced at Aaron, who nodded in agreement. "You've already proven it to yourself," he added. "Now it's just about sharing that with more people." The night of the auditions arrived, and the city's performing arts center buzzed with activity. Layla and Aaron found themselves in a room full of young musicians, each one tuning, warming up, preparing their minds for what lay ahead. The tension was palpable, and Layla couldn't help but feel a flicker of insecurity. But when she saw Aaron sitting at the old grand piano, calm and collected, she took a deep breath. She wasn't alone this time. When their number was called, they stepped onto the stage, bathed in the soft glow of theater lights. Layla positioned her violin under her chin, feeling the familiar weight settle into place. Aaron met her gaze, a silent message of solidarity. Then, without hesitation, they began. The music flowed, starting with a gentle introduction before building into a series of crescendos and flourishes. Layla could feel every note vibrating through her fingers, each bow stroke perfectly timed to Aaron's chords. There was a moment in the middle where the melody became almost a conversation, a call and response between the violin and piano. Layla leaned into it, letting the music guide her, unafraid of the audience's reaction. When the final note faded, there was a beat of silence before applause erupted, filling the hall. Layla looked at Aaron, and they shared a relieved, triumphant smile. They had done it. Not just played the piece, but owned it. As they left the stage, Miss Parker met them with a proud nod. "No matter what happens," she whispered, "you've already shown them something special." The results wouldn't be announced for weeks, but for Layla, it didn't matter. The real victory was how she had felt on that stage, confident, unbroken, fearless. As they walked back home through the bustling city streets, Aaron couldn't stop talking about the performance, analyzing every note. Layla just listened, letting the cool air clear her mind. When she finally entered her apartment, Caleb rushed to meet her. "Did you win?" he asked, eyes wide with hope. Layla knelt down, ruffling his hair. "We don't know yet, but it felt good, really good." Marie pulled her into a hug, whispering, "I'm proud of you, no matter what." Layla let herself sink into the warmth, knowing that whatever the outcome, she had found something more important than recognition. She had found herself. That night, as she played softly by the window, her music sounded different, fuller, richer, as if it had found its place in the world. Layla knew that this was just the beginning of many performances, many challenges, and many moments of doubt. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She knew how to face the stage, how to let her truth fill the room, and that made all the difference. The weeks after the audition were filled with a strange mix of anticipation and calm. Layla Johnson didn't dwell on the outcome as much as she thought she would. There was a sense of peace that had settled within her, something she hadn't felt before. Whether or not she and Aaron made it into the youth orchestra didn't seem as daunting as it once did. It wasn't that she didn't care, she cared deeply. But the act of putting herself out there, of playing without holding back, had changed something fundamental in her. Life at Lincoln Middle School continued to surprise her. Layla found herself smiling more, not because everything was perfect, but because she no longer felt invisible. People greeted her by name, and her presence no longer faded into the background. One morning, as she walked through the corridor with her violin case slung over her shoulder, a group of students from the pep band called out to her, asking if she'd help them arrange a new song for the upcoming basketball game. Layla agreed, surprised at how easy it was to say yes. In music club, Ms. Parker handed out sheet music for the new ensemble piece they were working on for the spring concert. Sasha and Malik were already arguing over whether the flute should take the lead during the bridge, and Aaron was sketching out chord progressions on the whiteboard. Layla watched them with a quiet smile. There was something beautiful about how everyone seemed to find their place, how the club had transformed from a reluctant gathering to a space where creativity flourished. During lunch, Sasha slid into the seat next to Layla, looking more animated than usual. "I've been thinking," she started, tapping her fingers on the table. "Maybe we should make the music club a permanent thing, like make it official, a real part of the school. So it keeps going after we move on." Layla considered it. "That's a great idea," she replied. "But we'd have to present it to the principal, make a case for why it's important." Aaron nodded from across the table, his eyes lighting up. "We could talk about how it's brought people together, how it's given a voice to students who didn't think they could share their talents." Malik, who was munching on his fries, chimed in. "And how it's made people stop thinking music is just some background noise. It's like it made people see each other differently." That afternoon, the group drafted a proposal detailing how the music club had not only encouraged creativity but also built a sense of community. Layla volunteered to present it, surprising even herself. When Principal Hargrove finally agreed to see them, Layla spoke clearly, her voice steady as she explained why the club mattered. By the end of the meeting, Principal Hargrove smiled, impressed by their passion and the way they presented their case. A week later, it was official. The Lincoln Middle School Music Club was now a recognized organization, complete with a small budget for supplies and sheet music. When Ms. Parker announced it to the club members, the room erupted in cheers. Layla couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. This wasn't just about music anymore. It was about leaving something behind that would last. One evening, as Layla was practicing in the living room, Caleb wandered in, dragging his little keyboard. He plopped down next to her, setting up his instrument with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could muster. "Teach me something," he demanded, his tone both determined and pleading. Layla couldn't help but laugh. "All right, how about we start with some simple scales?" They worked through the basics, Caleb's fingers fumbling but enthusiastic. He would occasionally hit the wrong note and burst into giggles, and Layla found herself laughing with him. The apartment filled with a chaotic harmony of beginner notes and practiced melodies, and for once, it didn't matter how it sounded. It was music, pure and simple. Later, Marie peeked in, leaning against the door frame with a soft smile. "You're quite the teacher," she teased. Layla shrugged. "He's eager. I guess it runs in the family." That night, after Caleb had fallen asleep, Layla found herself reflecting on how much had changed. Music had always been her escape, her way to cope. But now it was more than that. It was a bridge, a way to connect, to share, to belong. The next day, Ms. Parker pulled Layla aside after class, holding an envelope. "This came for you," she said, her smile both proud and cautious. Layla took the envelope, her hands trembling as she recognized the logo of the City Youth Orchestra. With a deep breath, she tore it open and read the letter. Her eyes widened as she saw the words, "Congratulations, you have been selected." Aaron's voice cut through her daze. "Well, what does it say?" Layla looked up, her face breaking into a smile so wide it made her cheeks hurt. "We got in," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Aaron whooped, pulling her into a hug, and even Ms. Parker couldn't hide her excitement. Word spread quickly, and by lunchtime, everyone seemed to know. Malik patted her shoulder, Sasha squealed and congratulated her, and even Coach Evans gave a gruff nod of approval. Layla couldn't believe how far she had come, from the girl who hid behind her violin to someone who wasn't afraid to take risks and be seen. That evening, as Layla played on her windowsill, the city lights twinkling like tiny stars, she thought about what lay ahead. The orchestra, new challenges, new faces. But she wasn't afraid. She knew that whatever came next, she would meet it head on with her violin in hand and her heart open. Layla had found her place, not just within the school or the club, but within herself. She had learned that being brave wasn't about never being scared. It was about playing through the fear, letting the music carry her past it. And as she closed her eyes, letting the final note fade into the quiet night, she knew that this was just the beginning of a new, beautiful melody. Looking back on Layla Johnson's journey, it's almost hard to believe that the girl who once clung to the shadows of Lincoln Middle School's hallways is the same girl who now leads a thriving music club, mentors her peers, and has earned a spot in the prestigious City Youth Orchestra. What began as a moment of humiliation, a careless dare from a teacher, became the catalyst that changed not only Layla's life, but the lives of those around her. It's a story of transformation, not just for one girl, but for an entire community that learned to see beyond assumptions and surface impressions. Layla's story begins with silence, not just the quietness of her personality, but the oppressive silence of being overlooked. At Lincoln Middle School, she was invisible, known only as the quiet girl who carried a violin that no one ever heard her play. The laughter that followed Ms. Parker's mocking suggestion to perform at the talent show was rooted in that silence. They didn't expect her to take the stage, much less to dazzle them. Layla's decision to perform wasn't an act of rebellion against their mockery, but a rebellion against her own fear. In that single moment of courage, she broke free from the walls that had kept her hidden. The performance itself was more than a display of musical talent. It was a declaration, a raw and unfiltered outpouring of emotion that spoke louder than words ever could. Layla wasn't just playing a violin, she was telling her story of loneliness, of resilience, of finding her voice despite being drowned out by others' expectations. The reaction from the audience wasn't just surprise or admiration. It was a collective realization that they had been wrong about her all along. What makes Layla's story so compelling isn't just her triumph on stage, but what follows. It would have been easy to bask in the newfound attention, to accept the applause and move on. But Layla doesn't stop there. She takes the seed of her courage and nurtures it, using her music not just to prove a point, but to build something lasting. The music club becomes a safe space, a place where other quiet souls find their voices. Under her guidance, the club grows from a casual gathering to an official organization, proving that one act of bravery can spark a chain reaction of change. Layla's relationship with her mother, Marie, remains a foundation throughout her journey. Marie never pushes her daughter to be someone she's not, but she gently encourages her to embrace her own potential. Their quiet, late-night conversations reveal that courage doesn't always look like grand gestures. Sometimes, it's as simple as picking up the bow and trying again after a long day. Layla's bond with her little brother Caleb also serves as a reminder that bravery can be taught not just through words but through example. Caleb's innocent admiration reflects how Layla's determination has influenced not just her peers, but her family as well. The support Layla finds in her friend Erin is another cornerstone of her journey. Erin's unwavering belief in her talent gives Layla the strength to keep pushing forward, even when doubt threatens to overwhelm her. Their partnership evolves from a shared love of music to a deeper connection founded on trust and mutual respect. Aaron's own growth mirrors Layla's as he learns to step out of his comfort zone and challenge his own perceptions of success. But Layla's story isn't just about the people who supported her. It's also about those who doubted her, those who mocked and dismissed her as unworthy of attention. Ms. Parker's initial condescension reflects a broader societal issue, the tendency to judge potential based on stereotypes or preconceived notions. Coach Evans' casual dismissal also represents how adults can inadvertently stifle young talent by failing to nurture it properly. Layla's ability to forgive them without bitterness demonstrates a maturity that goes beyond her years. The invitation to audition for the City Youth Orchestra represents the culmination of Layla's growth. No longer the timid girl afraid of judgment, she embraces the opportunity not just because it's a prestigious accomplishment, but because it's the next step in her journey of self-expression. By facing yet another daunting challenge, Layla proves to herself that courage isn't a one-time act but a continuous choice. At its heart, Layla's story is about more than just music. It's about the transformative power of vulnerability, about stepping onto a stage when your heart is pounding and your hands are shaking and choosing to play anyway. It's about recognizing that people will always have opinions, but those opinions don't define your worth. Layla's journey teaches us that true courage is being seen, letting the world witness not just your polished exterior, but your raw, unguarded truth. In our own lives, we often find ourselves shrinking back when faced with challenges, fearing the judgment that comes with taking a risk. We might avoid sharing our passions because we worry about how others will perceive us. But Layla's story reminds us that when we let ourselves be truly seen, flaws, fears, and all, we open the door to connection and growth. It's not about being perfect, it's about being honest. When you find yourself doubting your own abilities or wondering if your voice really matters, Think of Layla. Think of that quiet, unassuming girl who decided to play her truth in front of a crowd that expected her to fail. Let her story be a reminder that your voice, your story, your passion, no matter how small or overlooked, can change the way people see you. More importantly, it can change the way you see yourself. So, take the stage. Play your truth. And when the world tells you to stay silent, let your music be louder than their doubts. If you found Layla's story inspiring and want to hear more powerful, uplifting stories, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that touch hearts and change perspectives. Thank you for being part of this journey. Together, we'll keep finding the courage to let our voices be heard.